Mao Zedong created the People's Republic of China in 1949 and effectively became the leader of the multi-ethnic nation. Upon the foundation of the People's Republic, the actual identification and classification of minorities began. The first national census took place in 1953, which reported no fewer than 400 groups of minorities. The nationality statuses were determined using Stalin's definition that they had to share a common language, a common economic base, a common culture, and a common territory. In order to make Stalin's definition more applicable to China, the standards of historical origin and migration history were added. Therefore, in 1957, by applying these standards, 54 minority groups were recognized by the government. By a large margin, the majority of China's population was Han Chinese. A few of the prominent minority groups include the Mongols, the Bai, the Uyghurs, the Uyghur Muslims, and the Tibetans. Most of these groups lived on the peripherals of China, serving as a buffer between the Han Chinese and the inhabitants of other countries.
Tensions existed between the Han and the minority groups because the minorities were seen as inferior and backwards due to their traditional cultural values. The traditional customs of the minority groups contrasted with the hard-working, politically dedicated Han Chinese. The Han felt they had an obligation to bring the minorities into the modern communist revolutionary era.
Mao launched the Cultural Revolution in 1966 to revive the revolutionary spirit of his people and eliminate the four olds, which consisted of the ancient ideas, customs, culture, and habits of traditional China. During the Cultural Revolution, propaganda towards the minorities contradicted reality. Propaganda portrayed minorities happily enjoying the benefits of the PRC and communism, when in reality 6,000 monasteries were destroyed in Tibet and 790,000 people were killed in Inner Mongolia. Propaganda portrayed an ethnically unified China when there really existed tensions between the Han and the minorities. Minorities in general did not trust the Han, which can be exemplified in the local saying, "A rock does not make a good pillow, nor a Han Chinese a friend."
One of the most targeted minorities by the Chinese Communist Party were the Tibetans. Between the two groups, there existed a long struggle dating back to the 18th century Qing dynasty when Tibet was incorporated into the Chinese Empire. In 1911, upon the collapse of the Qing dynasty, the Tibetans drove out the Chinese. In October of 1950, the Chinese Communists invaded Tibet with the stated aim to liberate the country from imperialist oppression. The Dalai Lama was forced to flee to India for asylum. The Chinese occupation had negative impacts on Tibet. In 1959, Tibet expressed their discontent with the Chinese involvement by protesting. China enforced strict agricultural reforms on Tibet, leading to the nation's first recorded famine in 1960, where tens of thousands of Tibetans died from food shortages and poor harvests. The Muslims of China were also treated badly. They were forbidden to enter certain cities and were allowed limited posts in the military. In the region of Ningxia, where most of the Muslims lived, Uyghur Muslims were persecuted, their mosques were destroyed, and their religious books were burned.
Mao's policies and attitudes towards the minorities fluctuated between forced assimilation and pluralism. When he was rising to power, Mao recognized that he needed to appeal to the minorities in order to build up support. Due to this situation, Mao leaned towards pluralism, which allowed the minorities to retain their languages and their traditional ways. However, during Mao's reforms, including the Great Leap Forward and the Cultural Revolution, minorities were increasingly repressed. Instead of pluralism, his policies leaned towards forced assimilation, which involved minorities losing their languages and their distinguishing characteristics in order to become a part of the dominant Han culture. Mao fluctuated between these two concepts suddenly and violently.